Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We're looking at Kant, Iqbal's comments on Kant, and then he start his comparison with Imam Ghazali, the comparison between Ghazali and Kant. So, going to start from here, Ghazali's philosophical skepticism, which, however, went a little too far. Okay, virtually did the same kind of work in the world of Islam in breaking the back of the proud but shallow rationalism which moved in the same direction as pre-Kantian rationalism in Germany. So there's a lot of stuff here. But we start with this claim attributing philosophical skepticism to Imam Ghazali rahmatullah alayh, wa radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. So let's first try to understand what philosophical skepticism is before trying to figure out whether it can be attributed to Imam Ghazali. Okay, so what is this philosophical skepticism? So what is philosophical skepticism? Philosophical skepticism, so you have skepticism, and the meaning of skepticism is obvious enough in the ordinary language. We doubt things, their existence, their veracity, doubt the veracity of judgments. We are skeptical towards things, towards prediction, towards promises, towards claims, etc. And sometimes we are also skeptical about, whether something exists or not, whether our knowledge is reliable or not sometimes, because we all have some experience of illusion. So we can naturally think of, when we have experience of illusion of different sorts, we can wonder whether this is just one case of illusion, or this illusion is more broad. We all have sometime the experience of, obviously we all have the experience of dreams, but we also sometimes have experience of dreams which are so vivid that it's hard to differentiate them from the our waking life, and we can naturally wonder whether is there any real demarcation between the life of dream and the actually our waking life. So skepticism is ordinary enough, but that's not what philosophical skepticism is about, because we can distinguish between skepticism, two types of skepticism. To start with, skepticism, what we call ordinary, or which I just alluded to in my introductory remarks, and the philosophical skepticism. The basic difference between ordinary skepticism, there are many, but one basic difference between ordinary skepticism and philosophical skepticism is that ordinary skepticism is not systematic. It's not systematic. It's not extensive, I guess. In the sense in which I'll just explain in a moment. On the other hand, philosophical skepticism is systematic. Philosophical skepticism is also very extensive. And here is the distinction between ordinary skepticism and philosophical skepticism. If we define philosophical skepticism, so if we define philosophical skepticism as saying that we don't know, that's from one of the articles, I just randomly picked this definition. We don't know propositions which we think that we do know. That's one definition. I mean, there are many definitions, but so philosophical skepticism is this type of skepticism which claim that we don't know proposition, that is, claims to knowledge or something like that. Although proposition has a variety of meanings, I won't go into that. We don't know a proposition which we ordinarily, like in our ordinary life, think like ordinary person, as against think that we do know. So I think that I know that there is a tree there in front of across the street. There are some trees just in front of the house I'm in. I don't doubt these claims, just because sometime I have experience of my knowledge being deceptive, or my experience being turned out to be illusion, or sometimes I have a vivid dream where I can't differentiate between my waking life or my dream life. So I guess the main distinction between philosophical skepticism and ordinary skepticism is that ordinary skepticism doesn't, from certain experience of illusion and dreams and deception, which we can attribute to our experience and our claim to knowledge, we don't generalize it to doubt all the knowledge we have. We ordinarily think that even though we have our knowledge sometimes fails us, most of the time it is, and our experience sometimes fail us, most of the time it's fine. But philosophical skepticism, on the other hand, says we don't know from these deceptions and illusions. It draws the general and extensive and systematic conclusion that we don't know. We can't claim that we don't know. We can claim that we don't know proposition which we ordinarily think that we do know. So I ordinarily think that there is a tree in front of me, but philosophical skepticism says that, I don't know. This I just seem to think that I know, and if I really if I'm pressed to provide reasons, all those reasons are defeasible. That is, they can be challenged. So that's the position of philosophical skepticism. And philosophical skepticism can be applied to philosophical skepticism can be applied to our knowledge, however it can be applied to our perception, it can be applied to our claim to truth, and more than not, it can also be applied to criterion of truth. So when we talk about truth, people must ask us to provide the criterion on the basis of which I distinguish between true and false statements, or true or false claim. And philosophical skepticism might cast doubt on this criterion and say that these criteria are defeasible, that is, they are not beyond doubt, and if they are not beyond doubt, then they shouldn't be considered criterion of truth, because a criterion of truth which plays you false at times is no criterion at all. So this is all philosophical skepticism. So this was the distinction between ordinary skepticism and philosophical skepticism. Now, there's another distinction which we should look at, and probably we will finish this with that distinction, and that's the distinction between methodological versus spontaneous skepticism. I guess I'll explain the distinction in a minute, but I guess spontaneous skepticism can be both. I haven't thought about it, but if you press me on this, spontaneous skepticism can be, I would say, ordinary as well as philosophical. So a philosophical skeptic can be faced with a spontaneous doubt. An ordinary person can be faced with spontaneous doubt. I think probably we should use spontaneous doubt versus methodological doubt. On the other hand, methodological doubt probably is, I can't be sure that ordinary doubt cannot be methodological in any sense, but it's mainly, suffice to say that I would be less hesitant to claim that methodological doubt is philosophical, part of philosophical skepticism. So what is the distinction between methodological doubt and spontaneous? Now, spontaneous doubt is whether it is a psychological condition or more part of my being, is something which occurs without my effort or intention. So if you are a religious person, you might have experienced, it's part of religious tradition, these doubts. You are inflicted by doubts about the existence of God. You are inflicted about stuff. In daily life, you can be inflicted about doubts about various things. It's not as if you are trying to doubt something actively. So in that sense, the spontaneous doubt is more like a passive state, which occurs to you and you try to then, get out of it or find some solution. It becomes a problem. If it becomes a problem, most of the time it just goes away. So that's the spontaneous doubt. And a lot of you will find in some philosophers and religious thinkers, spontaneous doubt is very common. And a lot of what Imam Ghazali radiallahu ta'ala anhu says in his Al-Munqiz min al-Dalal, it's type of a spontaneous doubt, and mostly not philosophical doubt in the sense in which we described it, but certainly not a methodological doubt, as we'll see in a minute. Now, methodological doubt, on the other hand, is something probably Descartes invented, and my own impression is that methodological doubt didn't exist systematically, at least, before doubt, because as we will see, philosophical skepticism is a rich tradition. Philosophical skepticism is a rich tradition. Philosophical in ancient world, and then we'll find in medieval world as well. And Descartes, who is the founder of modern skepticism, was a great student of this tradition. But he transformed that tradition into something entirely new. And in this context, our last session on how to read history of ideas, 2 ways of reading, is very important in this context. So if you haven't watched that, you should watch it if you like. So what was I saying? So in that sense, Descartes, I feel that invented methodological doubt, but I won't press my claim if you don't agree with me on this at this point. So methodological, what is methodological skepticism or methodological doubt? The methodological doubt is you use, doubt as a method. So it's your own, it's not passive, it's active in the sense that you are actually creating a doubt for something else. And in Descartes, for example, you will see that he used this method doubt as a method to actually defeat skepticism. And in fact, he claimed that he was the first person using doubt as a method to overcome doubt once for all, to refute skepticism, to refute skepticism. And in fact, Descartes claimed that he was the first person to decisively refute skepticism. And the logic behind that is that you take doubt to such an extreme that it becomes clear that there comes a point where doubt becomes impossible. And that's what Descartes did. And then you treat that as an absolute anchor, something beyond doubt, and then you rebuild your knowledge as Descartes did. So you use one purpose, at least in Descartes, of the using doubt as a method is to actually defeat doubt, to refute skepticism. Another important purpose of Descartes' methodological skepticism, method of doubt, was to actually arrive at a criterion of truth which is beyond doubt, which is absolutely certain, which is incorrigible, so to speak. So basically, methodological doubt, I'm saying, is different from spontaneous doubt in the sense that you actually use doubt as an active method for something else. So you are not necessarily inflicted by doubt. And in Descartes, as I say, at least there are two purposes he uses them for. One is to overcome doubt. Overcome not a spontaneous doubt, but doubt in the sense that refute the skeptic. And second is to arrive at a criterion of truth which is incorrigible, which is beyond doubt. Because only then he thought that we could build a knowledge from anew on solid basis. So basically this is methodic doubt, and obviously Imam Ghazali has no such project as we will say. So his doubt is, firstly, is not a philosophical skeptic. Ghazali is not a philosophical skeptic. And even if we attribute some sort of philosophical skepticism to him, he's certainly not a methodological philosophical skeptic in the Cartesian sense. He didn't use doubt as his cornerstone of his epistemology or his method to build a new structure of knowledge from the scratch based on some purportedly incorrigible criterion of truth. Okay. Now, one last thing, I think, and methodological skepticism, another thing about methodological skepticism, at least its modern Cartesian variety, is that methodological skepticism is that if we contrast it to the ancient skeptics, there are many differences, but on the methodological level, one difference is that methodological skepticism is theoretical. On the other hand, ancient skepticism was practical. The ancient skeptic was mainly concerned with, on the methodological level anyway, with the practical uncertainties of life. So in that sense, ancient skeptic took his doubt very seriously on the practical level, in the sense that if they were saying that they are doubting the existence of something external, for example, it would have bearing on their action. So they actually acted on their skepticism. That's why ancient skepticism has this limit that they can't really go beyond. Like, for example, if you are denying the existence of a whole deep pit in front of you, and you really doubting it, then you would have to act on it. So that's why that provided the practical limit on their doubt. So, and in the other way, so it also made it practically serious. So to doubt for the ancient skeptic was to live their skepticism. On the other hand, Descartes' skepticism is theoretical. It has no practical implication. So he's actually not practically, he doesn't practically believe that the tree doesn't exist, or the pit doesn't exist, or the external world doesn't exist, or his body doesn't exist. No. He is not practically concerned about it. He goes about his business without any doubts. But theoretically, because it is an active method, so practically his skepticism, Descartes' skepticism, is not serious at all. Because so that's why he can, by virtue of that, he can actually take his skepticism to extreme. So he denies he imagines that his body doesn't exist. He imagines that the world is overcome by a mad scientist, for example, or a demon who is all powerful, and he's just making me think that everything exists, even though it doesn't exist. So that was just a theoretical thought experiment, and its purpose was, and theoretically it was very serious, though it could take it to extreme. But practically it wasn't serious at all, and there was no practical bearing of this skepticism. Its main purpose was to overcome the theoretically press skepticism to its limit or to its extreme, so that he could refute the skeptic and also come up with a criterion of truth which was incorrigible. So this is philosophical skepticism, and as far as I can see, I'll look at it in the next videos. To say that Imam Ghazali was a philosophical skeptic is to just ignore the distinction between methodological skepticism and other forms of skepticism, and specifically to ignore the very modern nature of this methodological skepticism and the Cartesian doubt. Yes, so, and it has bearing on how you on the relationship between Imam Ghazali and Descartes, and the relationship between Imam Ghazali and Kant, and it has bearing on your understanding of what Kant and Descartes were actually doing and what Imam Ghazali was doing, which are totally different works. As I will show, I've talked about it previously, but as I will show in the coming sessions. Thank you.